The sun was already high when the wagon rolled along the dust-bitten road, wheels groaning like old bones. Heat shimmered over the prairie, blurring the far horizon where the sky bent low to kiss the land. Cicadas whined from dry grass, a chorus that never ceased in the long hours of day. And upon the ranch porch, a man sat alone in his chair, broad shoulders shadowed by the brim of his hat, a figure carved from stillness and silence. Isaac had grown used to that silence, the silence of mornings where only his own footsteps echoed across wooden floors, where the second chair on the porch sat empty, collecting dust like an unspoken truth. He had come to expect the wide horizon to answer him with nothing but wind. But the day was not like all others. He lifted his head at the sound of wheels, narrowed his eyes against the white glare, and saw the wagon approach. Two men on the driver's bench laughed as they urged the horse along, their voices carrying before them like the rattle of loose tin. And in the back, stiff as if she'd been planted there and forgotten, sat a woman. She clutched a carpet-bag against her chest, chin bowed, hair falling in loose strands from a kerchief tied too hastily. She did not look up. The wagon jolted and shook, and her grip tightened, but she made no sound. Isaac stood. His boots hit the porch with a solid weight. He had no visitors scheduled, and the men guiding that wagon were troublemakers from town, boys who thought cruelty was a form of humor. Already, his jaw tightened. They pulled the wagon to a halt before the gate, laughter spilling like sour ale. "Rancher," one called, tipping his hat in mock courtesy. "We brought you something. Thought a lonely man might like a gift." He motioned with his chin toward the woman, who sat stiff and small in the shadow of their cruelty. "Don't say we never did you no favors." Isaac's gaze moved from the men to her. She raised her head, only slightly, and in that moment he caught the shape of her face, cheeks too hollow, eyes rimmed by exhaustion, lips that seemed to know more of silence than speech. She was not ugly, though the word clung to her like dust. She was simply weary, carved by sorrow the way wind carves stone. The mockery stung Isaac not for her sake alone, but because he knew loneliness when he saw it, and he knew the sting of being measured and found wanting. "Get off my land," he said flatly. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard as dry river rock. The men only grinned wider. "Now don't be ungrateful. Her in-laws said she's too much trouble. Figured you'd take her, since no one else would." One spat into the dust, reins jangling as he shifted. "Ugly widow, good enough for a rancher who talks more to cattle than folks." The woman closed her eyes, as though each word was a lash. Isaac felt the heat rise in his chest, but he kept still. Anger gave men like these their sport. Without another word, he stepped forward, untied the gate, and held out his hand toward the wagon. She hesitated, then moved with slow care, lowering herself down until her boots met the dirt. The bag trembled in her grasp. Isaac took the strap from her hand, steady, nothing more, then set it at his side. "Leave," he told the men again. They laughed, turned their wagon, and rattled away, their noise fading into the wide emptiness. Dust hung in the air long after they were gone. The woman stood silent, shoulders hunched, as if she wished she could vanish into the earth. Isaac studied her only long enough to see the way her breath quivered. "You'll need rest," he said, voice gentler now. "Barn's cooler this time of day. Come on." He picked up her bag, started toward the yard. She followed, step slow, as though each footfall carried the weight of shame. Inside the barn, the scent of hay and leather mingled. Light spilled through cracks in the wood, dust motes drifting like tiny spirits. He set the bag by a stack of bales, cleared a place where she might sit. She lowered herself carefully, smoothing her skirt as though the gesture could restore some piece of dignity. He removed his hat, held it in his hands. "Name's Isaac." He waited. Her voice, when it came, was low, fragile. "Layla." The name was soft, almost swallowed. She did not look at him, but at the ground. "Layla," he repeated, and nodded. The syllables felt strange but right in his mouth. He placed the hat back on his head. "You'll be safe here." She gave no answer, only folded her hands tight in her lap. Silence filled the barn, thick as dust. That night, Isaac sat alone on the porch, watching the horizon fade. He thought of her, of the way her eyes had flickered at the men's laughter, like a candle struggling in wind. He thought of how the world could be so merciless to one who had already lost much. Loneliness knew its own, he supposed. He leaned back, the wood creaking under his weight, and let the cicadas sing the sky into darkness. The days began to turn like slow pages. She stayed quiet, moved with care around the ranch, never asking, never presuming. He watched from a distance as she fetched water from the pump, gathered kindling, swept dust from the porch. Her presence filled the air with something he had not known he missed, the rhythm of another life alongside his own. Yet she never smiled, not once, and each evening her shoulders seemed to fold inward a little more, as if memory pressed them down. One afternoon, when Isaac rode into town for supplies, he heard them again. Gossip flew thicker than flies near the saloon. "Rancher's got himself that ugly widow now," a man guffawed, slapping his thigh. "Didn't think even he'd stoop so low." Another joined, "Bet she's more trouble than the cows he keeps." Their laughter rose, and Isaac felt the old burn of shame crawl up his spine. He said nothing. Words against a tide of mockery were wasted. But the silence he carried back to the ranch was heavier than any sack of grain. "Layla, too?" Heard whispers. A neighbor woman stopped by with feigned kindness, speaking sweet words laced with venom. "Poor thing, sent out here all alone. Must be hard, being unwanted." When the woman left, Layla lingered by the kitchen table, hands trembling as she folded a rag again and again. Isaac saw her eyes glisten before she turned away, and his chest ached with something he could not name. Slowly, without design, small changes grew. She mended torn shirts with steady stitches, baked bread that filled the house with warmth, tended the hens until their clucking softened like content children. Isaac noticed the lightness her presence lent to rooms long empty. One evening, as he returned from the fields, he found her humming softly while sweeping. The sound was gentle, unpracticed, but it stilled him in the doorway. She stopped when she saw him, embarrassed, but he only nodded, unable to put words to the comfort it gave. At supper, their words began to stretch beyond necessity. She asked if the harvest would be strong this year. He told her about storms that sometimes came sudden, fierce enough to strip fields bare. She listened, not with the distance most gave his talk, but with eyes intent, as if his words were worth hearing. That night, he pulled a second chair beside his own on the porch. She sat, hesitant, but stayed until the stars broke white across the sky. They spoke little. The silence between them was no longer empty but shared. Still, the cruelty of others returned like a tide. One day, a pair of cowhands rode by, jeering. "Ugly wife suits you, rancher," they hollered, laughter echoing across the fields. Isaac's fists tightened around the fence rail until his knuckles whitened. But he did not strike out. He only watched them ride on, jaw clenched, shame burning hot. Behind him, Layla's breath hitched. Later, she broke in a whisper, unable to hold it. "I was never wanted," she said. "Not by them. Not by anyone. Married off like charity, mocked every day. When he died, they sent me away as burden. Even God must have tired of looking at me." Her voice cracked on the last words. Isaac turned, the pain in her words like a knife in his chest. "Don't you ever say that again," he said, quiet but fierce. His eyes met hers, steady. "God never tires. And neither do I." For the first time, she looked at him as though she believed he might mean it. From then, change deepened. She planted flowers by the porch, small wild blooms that leaned toward the sun. She opened windows that had been shut, letting light fall across worn floors. He found himself listening for her voice, for the soft rhythm of her steps. His loneliness loosened, thread by thread. And when she laughed once, brief, startled by a clumsy chicken, he felt the sound settle into his chest like something long lost returned. Her in-laws came one afternoon, riding hard, sneeze etched deep. They looked her up and down as though inspecting spoiled goods. "So, rancher," one called, "how's the joke wearing on you? Thought maybe you'd toss her back by now." Layla stiffened, face pale. Isaac stepped forward, shoulders squared. "She's no joke," he said, voice low but carrying. "And you'll not speak that way, on my land. Leave." Their laughter faltered when they saw the fire in his eyes. With muttered curses, they turned their horses and rode off. Layla's eyes shimmered, tears she tried to hide, but he saw them. For once, she did not feel abandoned. That evening, As the sun spilled gold across the fields, Isaac found her on the porch. She sat with her hands folded, hair loose around her shoulders, face softened in the light. He paused, watching, heart heavy with the words that pressed against him. He could not hold them any longer. "Layla," he said, voice steady. She looked up, startled by the weight in his tone. "The world called you a joke. But you are the only prayer I never knew I had." Silence followed, thick, the cicadas hushed as though listening. Her lips parted, eyes wide. "You mean that?" she whispered. He stepped closer, took her hand in his rough palm. "I do. And if you'll have me, I want this ranch, this life, with you. Not tomorrow. Not maybe. Now." From his pocket, he drew a small silver band, tarnished with age, once his mother's. He slipped it onto her finger, and it fit as though waiting all these years. Her breath trembled. Tears welled but did not fall. She nodded, unable to find words, only gripping his hand tight. And in that moment, the wide land seemed to exhale, the wind brushing tall grass like a hymn. The ranch was no longer silent. 2 chairs stood filled on the porch, shadows side by side as dusk deepened. The cruel laughter of others could not reach them here. They had found each other, not as burden, not as joke, but as answer. And so it was that what the world mocked as worthless became the treasure both had been waiting for. They sat together as the stars rose, the silence between them full, not empty. The night stretched wide, promising. And if one listened close, the land itself seemed to murmur, "Beauty is not given by those who mock, but by those who see." Before you ride off, tell me where in the wide world you're watching from.